So, today we will be discussing a very controversial topic amongst the Red Dead Redemption 2 community, one that has been heavily debated and for good reason, mostly because information on this topic is very scarce because honestly, me as well as other people in the community seem to believe that Rockstar kept these details out for that exact reason. Um, they wanted it to be somewhat obscure so that you don't really know what the truth was. So today, what we will be discussing was Micah Bell a rat? For the sake of clarity and consistency, I will be separating my reasonings into several different categories: backstory, relevancy, misunderstanding, and Pinkertons. So, category 1, backstory. So first and foremost, according to Micah Bell's wiki, Micah Bell III was born circa 1860 to Micah Bell Jr., a ruthless petty outlaw. When Micah was 17 in 1877, he and his father were on the run for the brutal double homicide of Roscoe and Jean Briggs, who were hung from the rafters with their throats slit. It can be assumed that he was his father's partner in crime throughout his upbringing, although evidence suggests that he also ran with his brother Amos for a time. Micah would later have a falling out with Amos, who by 1899 is repentant for his actions and lives in California with his wife and daughters, whilst making it clear to Micah that he wants no contact with him, threatening to kill him if he's anywhere near himself and his family. Category 2, Micah's relevance. In 1898, Micah met Dutch Vanderlyn at a bar in a town of the Grizzlies named Crenshaw Hills. Dutch tries to sell gold that his gang had recently stolen, but the deal went sour, leading to an altercation where Micah stepped in and saved his life. As a result, Micah was accepted into the Vanderlyn gang. Despite being an experienced outlaw who was respected for his skill in combat, Micah was generally disliked within the gang. In particular, Arthur and Hosea saw him as argumentative, reckless, and hot-headed, with Dutch alone taking a liking to him. So right from the get-go, we understand that Mike was never a career criminal on the same level as Dutch and the Vanderlyn gang. Dutch was conducting larger scores, committing larger crimes, and quite possibly has a much larger bounty on his head than Micah. There is a catch, though. Although Micah was a 3-bit gangster, he was a loyal gangster at that. He was raised to be a criminal since childhood with his father and brother, and never once considered ratting on either one of them. I really do feel as though Micah's loyalty is to that of Dutch than quite literally anyone else in the gang, because he has no emotional bond towards any of them besides Dutch, who he felt compelled to save in a fight when he could have just walked away and let it happen. Misunderstandings. I think it's a combination of things, not just Micah. Arthur tells Dutch that the gang has been getting sloppy and more careless. That's Dutch's fault. When the Pinkertons found the gang in the cabin after getting back from Guarma, Bill says he asked for directions of where to go. They found Dutch and the gang in the St. Denis Bank because they captured Hosea. And the Blackwater heist went south probably because Micah had zero heist experience. I truly believe the latter simply because if we were to entertain the idea that Micah was a rat and believe that Milton said, then Micah wasn't a rat up until Guarma. Then Micah wasn't a rat up until after Guarma. The shortcomings of the gang prior to Guarma were primarily Dutch's fault, even if we were to believe my theory, because he shouldn't have given an inexperienced gang member the authority over planning their largest heist up until that point. It could be 100% possible that Molly was the real rat, which segues into our last category: Pinkertons. I personally believe that Molly was the real rat and not Micah. Although Micah acts odd, it's only because he has no emotional connection towards anyone in the gang besides Dutch. He knows he's like the red-headed stepchild of the gang, which can explain why on many occasions he can be caught being quite distant towards most, and weird or flirty with some of the female members. His hatred towards Arthur wasn't really developed until halfway through the game when Arthur is diagnosed with TB, and although some come to perceive this as Micah showing his true colors towards Arthur, I don't think it is, because Micah seems to somewhat enjoy Arthur at the start of the game, especially during the Strawberry Shootout. I believe the Pinkertons did, in fact, speak to Micah, but got to Molly first while the other gang members were stranded on Guarma. They could have told Micah the same lie that they told Arthur, that Arthur was the rat, like when Milton told Arthur that Micah was the rat, and it could explain why Micah keeps asking Arthur if he were followed. There's really no reason for Milton to give this information away to Arthur, or anyone for that matter who were also in the room, unless he intended to kill them all. Secondly, notice how in 1907, Micah has a larger gang than Dutch ever did. The Pinkertons, for whatever reason, decided to give Micah so much autonomy while working with the government that they allowed him to create a much more larger and more ruthless gang than the Vanderlyn gang ever was. This could either explain why they had such a short leash on John in 1911. They probably didn't want him doing something similar, but it was still Edgar Ross who allowed it anyways. I'm conflicted to even say Michael worked for the government, because what really was his end goal of getting the Vanderlyn gang handed over to the authorities? Even when he was completely alone with Arthur when fighting him, he still denied being a rat or working with the government when he didn't even need to lie anymore by that point. Could be 100% possible that Milton knew there was already distrust, so he told Arthur that they picked Micah up to start some infighting, which did inevitably separate the gang, given that everyone who initially sided with Dutch, like Javier and Bill, are not members of Micah's 1907 gang, which means they left at some point after 1899. If it were the Vanderlyn gang that the Pinkertons were really after, why didn't they intervene when Michael was arrested in Strawberry? Why didn't the Pinkertons come to snatch up Sean from the bounty hunters sooner? Because the Pinkertons were not being relayed information from an inside informant. An informant who could have possibly grown more resentful and distrusting of the gang, and really only Molly O'Shea had characteristics of. Her love affair with Dutch is a widely documented topic. I'd suggest watching some videos on it for your own conclusion. But clearly it drove her to madness. I wouldn't put it past her to rat on Dutch or his gang for this very reason. Her sanity and eventual lack of interest from Dutch nearly matches the same timestamps as when the Pinkertons really started to strangle the Vanderlyn gang. Again, mostly after Guarma. Milton says that Molly didn't say a word and had to let her go. Why wouldn't she say anything to them? She really had no reason not to by this point. And you're honestly expecting me to believe that the agency who kidnapped Abigail and beat Sadie unconscious just allowed someone like Molly to walk? There had to have been some incentive to give Molly, much like how they would have needed one for Micah, but it's more likely that Molly snitched because she was a long way from home, grew up as a city girl as explained by Sean, and loved the finer things in life. I think it would have been easier to persuade Molly by dangling money in front of her than Micah, who was already nearly second in command of Dutch's gang. Do I think Micah had some sort of interior motive? Yes. I definitely do think at some point Micah was after Arthur's position in the gang to get closer to Dutch. Why wouldn't he, though? As far as gang members, Dutch was all he had. Micah and Dutch both ran off with the Blackwater money, which is also kind of unexplainable why the Pinkertons would let them do that. It's odd how the Pinkertons would have let Micah fortify Dutch, the man they've been after this entire time, on top of a snowy hill surrounded by a swath of Micah's gang members. If Micah were in the government's pocket, he probably would have been reprimanded by the Pinkertons for killing that underage girl that Cleet mentions in the epilogue. I don't see a possibility where Michael works with the government, but has that sort of complete autonomy, while John's cooperation with the government made him fulfill certain tasks, such as either killing or capturing members like Bill, Javier, and Dutch. We don't really see this from Micah all too much. Molly ratted about the bank robbery in St. Denis. It ended with Hosea being captured and eventually killed, along with Lenny. Not to mention that Micah killed a ton of Pinkerton agents. If he were working with the government, he would have had the utmost trust from the agency to kill as many men as he did while riding with Dutch. But what do you guys think? Was Molly the true rat? Was Micah really innocent? Or was Micah the true rat? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.